Hello folks and welcome to the F1 Live post-testing show with me, Will Buxton, him, Jolyon Palmer, Rosanna Tennant, Sam Collins, and of course all you folks at home. Jolyon, it has been a week, an incredible week. We've seen a lot of questions answered, even more questions asked. What have you made essentially of it so far?
It's been a whirlwind, not enough questions answered. It's gone by in a flash. And I think the main thing is that we don't know very much, basically. The pack seems to be tightened, which makes it very difficult to predict anything too great. Mercedes, maybe the headline, struggling a little bit slightly.
Absolutely. We will try and unpack all of that as we go through the next, however long this show is going to be, probably between 30 to 45 minutes, depending on interviews that we pick up. And one of the people who will be bringing us those interviews is Rosanna, who's down in the paddock, and we'll roll to her very soon. We're going to have a lot of content coming for you today, as you said, some interviews coming your way. Sam Collins is going to be picking through all of the technical intricacies that we've seen on these cars. Of course, massive changes between last year and this, despite the fact that this season was supposed to see a carryover, certainly for the majority of the last year's cars, into this season. Some unseen content from the week, and Jolyon and I will, as we've said, try and give you some semblance, some idea of the competitive order as we go into the Bahrain Grand Prix, which will be here in 2 weeks' time. Now, down in the paddock is Rosanna Tennant. It's been a busy week. Rosanna has been down there talking to a lot of people, getting the intel on everything. Rosanna, where are you? And what's been your highlight of the week?
Hi, Will. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, you come to me just as the helicopter flies over the paddock. I'm doing well. It's a little bit chilly, actually. I was expecting to have a balmy evening here in Bahrain before we all fly home. What's been my highlight? To be honest, it's just being back in the Formula One paddock. People who've been watching on F1 TV will know that we've been doing our pre-race and post-race show from Biggin Hill in the studio. So to be here in the paddock is an absolute treat for me. And it's different. I'm not going to lie, it is different. It's quieter, of course. We haven't got fans here. At Barcelona, in years gone by, we've had fans here for testing, which has added to the buzz. But not having the fans here, whilst it's sad, while you guys aren't here, it's also been great. We've been able to see some of the team personnel, the drivers are about, because often we're so cold in Barcelona that the drivers are wearing their puffers and they kind of keep inside the hospitality and don't come out and about. So it's been nice to see the drivers strolling about the paddock. I've just seen Lando Norris pass past us, our filming crew. But generally, it's a nice, chilled vibe. And of course, the teams aren't really going anywhere. Some are going back to their bases, but we'll be back here in a fortnight, Will, which is, it's crazy, isn't it? Testing in the same place as the first race. I can't remember when that has ever happened, but it's lovely down here in the paddock. So do come back to me. I'll have lots of insight, and hopefully I might grab someone with my boom mic.
It's great to see you back in the paddock, Rosanna. Great that you've been here all week long. Joe, it's great to see you back at a racetrack as well. And of course, testing, we know, we've been here many, many times before. The lap times we've seen aren't necessarily all that representative. What is representative, though, is the workload the teams have got through. And this year, just 3 days of pre-season testing to get everything crammed into.
They've done it pretty well. There's been actually relatively few big incidents, well, there's been no big incidents and a few reliability concerns, but typically over 100 days, 100 laps in the car per team in a day. 3 days is not a lot, but again, at least it's in Bahrain, a track that they know so well. The first race is back here again, and the cars aren't all that different either. So I think that's probably partly why they were so reliable. Conditions not ideal, but I think they've done what they could in the time.
Of course, we were supposed to be testing in Barcelona and having the first race in Australia. But the fact that everything got delayed, the fact that everything got changed because of the sort of ongoing pandemic across the world actually gave the teams a little bit more time to get their cars on the track, get them prepared for arriving here for what has turned into this 3-day test in Bahrain, following immediately into the race in a fortnight, I should say, it's time.
Yeah. 9 teams doing a shakedown, 1 team not.
Yes.
First morning, that team has a gearbox issue. I don't know if it was a bad coincidence or what, but they were very prepared in general, all the teams, and it paid off really with a lot of running. But again, they just looked so even across the board. There was no massive drama, no incident of any great note, but just the headline really, that Mercedes are that team that was struggling early with the gearbox issue. Lewis Hamilton particularly struggling with, he didn't look comfortable at all. Every time he got in the car was struggling with the rear end, had another spin today, spin yesterday. Difficult time maybe.
Very difficult time for Lewis Hamilton, for Mercedes-AMG Petronas, both of them going for an 8th world title in 2021. But it isn't Mercedes and it isn't Lewis Hamilton who top the times at the end of the week. That honour instead goes to Max Verstappen and to Red Bull Racing. Verstappen, top of the pile on a 1:28.960 on the C4, the second softest tyre. 203 laps cumulative for the week. Yuki Tsunoda, the rookie in the Alpha Tauri, just 0.093 behind on the softest tyre of all, the C5. 185 laps, desperately impressive, not just for him, but for Alpha Tauri as a whole. Carlos Sainz then, third fastest overall for the week, but Ferrari not necessarily all plain sailing. Kimi Raikkonen with a monstrous run through on laps today, fourth fastest for the week. Then Lewis Hamilton, George Russell sixth, Daniel Ricciardo seventh, Perez 8th, and just outside of the top 10 positions, Pierre Gasly in the Alpha Tauri. A really good run for him this week as well. Big question marks over Alpine, over Williams, Haas, of course, as well. But the biggest disappointment, along with Mercedes, potentially, that Aston Martin, so much expected of them, turning up with that new livery, the intent to win the World Championship within 3 to 5 years, and one of the teams who actually had to finish today early, boost issue for them with that all-new green car, and Sebastian Vettel, I think, a little disappointed at the end of these 3 days.
No doubt, absolutely no doubt. It's the two drivers that have struggled the most probably, or have had the worst test, Lewis Hamilton being one of them that we mentioned, but Sebastian's had a really bad time of it. Aston Martin, a lot of hype, a lot of excitement coming from Racing Point, where they were really strong last year. Still got a close Mercedes tie-up. Got a 4-time world champion now in the car, but he wasn't driving all that much. Gearbox issue for him, as well as Valtteri Bottas's Mercedes. Vettel took that one on and was in the garage for a lot of the time in his day 2 morning. And then, as you say, not getting the soft tyre run that he would have wanted just this afternoon. One of the only drivers to have not put on the red striped tyres and see what he could do with them.
It's a beautiful looking car. We'll talk about it more later in the show with Sam Collins. Very definitely an Aston Martin, not just a green Mercedes, as was the cruel jibe put towards Racing Point last year, nicknamed the Pink Mercedes. Very much their own car, but as we've said, there were inherent issues with it all the way through the test. They didn't get anywhere near as many laps on the board as they would have hoped for. But we have to start this whole discussion really by focusing on Mercedes. And we were talking about it earlier today. Is it just that we look at their perfection over recent years and that anything less than perfect is therefore a shock to us? Or do we have to come out of these 3 days of testing with a skittish car, with a loose rear end in which Lewis Hamilton doesn't feel confident or comfortable? Do we look at that as a genuine concern?
I think it's very difficult to judge with Mercedes because they are Mercedes. They're so strong. And I think in 2019 was the year where everyone was saying Ferrari are the team to beat. And then we got to Melbourne, and it was one of the most dominant qualifying displays by Mercedes, who ended up walking the title. I get the impression that they've never struggled this much in a pre-season test before. The reliability wasn't perfect for them. They've had some reliability problems in testing before. Last year it was the engine, this year it was the gearbox. But the car just doesn't look good on track. When Hamilton got into it first day in the sandstorm, terrible conditions, high wind, but it was the same for everyone, and he was just all over the place with the rear end. Then he had a spin day 2. Again, not great conditions, but he was the one that spun and got it stuck in the gravel. And again, day 3, not looking great. I'm sure they'll be fine. I'm sure they'll be there or thereabouts. But I do think they've had a tricky time.
Red Bull have looked bulletproof. The car has looked fast, both for Max Verstappen and for Sergio Perez. Do they enter the season as favourites?
This is what I'm trying to weigh up, really, in my mind. If you take testing, yeah. If you take testing, absolutely they do. Max was rapid today. And you could see he was absolutely on the ragged edge of the car, but so many drivers were. His was just electric. He was off the track around the outside of turn 11, scrappy, but still quick somehow. And when he hooked it up, he topped the times. It doesn't mean that much, but I just think the drivability of the Red Bull looks so much better than it has been for the last couple of years. I think it's giving Max some confidence again. he never lacked it, but the second driver has, and now they got Sergio Perez in the car, look quite solid as well.
Lewis Hamilton said earlier today that Red Bull is a different animal this year, and I think a different proposition for the sport and for Mercedes as well. He also mentioned McLaren, who've had an incredibly strong test. Of course, they changed from Renault to Mercedes engines over the winter. They have had a bulletproof, perfect test. Every single thing they wanted to test ticked off the list. Andreas Seidel, I was speaking to him earlier, delighted with their week's running. You then, though, have what was last year, this midfield pack. McLaren, Aston Martin, Ferrari, AlphaTauri, who were also incredibly impressive, and Alpine. Did I already mention them? Maybe, maybe not. Martin Bukowski at Alpine said to me today he doesn't believe there's a midfield anymore, just a field. Is that what we've seen?
It's what we've seen, but I've not heard that. That's brilliant. Because that is what we've seen, really. The field looks so tight. And, yeah, the Red Bull has looked good, particularly in the hands of Verstappen.
Yeah.
Unsurprisingly, more familiar, and he's rapid. But the field does just look super tight. And to try and pick the bones of it this year is really, really difficult. McLaren look good. AlphaTauri,
they've looked great.
Pace. Yeah, they do look good. And rookie driver Yuki Tsunoda getting on with it pretty well today. So Alpine looked quite good. Ferrari, I had question marks about Ferrari.
Yeah, me too.
They've come on quite good today as well. Carlos Sainz getting down to a better pace. Little fin popping up on their rear diffuser, which looks quite nice as well. A lot of innovations, and they all look quite good, really.
Talking about a fin, Kimi Räikkönen put in a massive stint behind the wheel of the Alfa Romeo today. Relatively quiet test for them, but when they needed to, Räikkönen, Giovinazzi, both proving pretty quick. That Ferrari engine, which suffered so much last year, we hope has taken a step forward and maybe given a little bit more competitiveness both to Ferrari and their customer teams.
Yeah, obviously this is what Ferrari need to be competitive. Okay, the car wasn't great. Maybe they're getting somewhere, particularly today, but the customer teams were struggling a lot last year, Haas and Alfa Romeo. And Alfa Romeo particularly looked like they were getting somewhere this 3 days. I think they could be ahead of the Williams Haas battle. Quick one on the midfield.
I know you've got to go very soon, but before you do, I want a quick one on Williams, who, of course, 2 years ago famously didn't even get a car to testing. This year, they did 3 days of running and good running.
Good running. They had the reserve driver in for the first day, which is not ideal when you have 3 days to give one up to a guy that might not drive the car ever again. But Latifi and Russell both looked like they did okay. I still think they're going to be off the back of the midfield, but limited running. I think they're going to be maybe behind Alfa Romeo, who are the ones nudging that pack again.
Jolyon, it's been brilliant sharing a commentary box with you this week, mate. It does look like it's going to be a really close season. Thank you for your insight and your input all the way through. Can't wait to hear you call the season back at home. For now, though, we will roll down to Rosanna, who is in the paddock and I believe is down at McLaren.
Thanks, Will. Yeah, I am down here at McLaren, and I just saw Andreas Seidel coming out of the McLaren garage, and he was doing fist bumps with all the mechanics who are out here dealing with the tyres. And I said, Andreas, is it a this? Is it a this? Or is it a this? And he said, we'll see in 2 weeks. And of course, that is the line, isn't it, at testing? But then he said, but actually, yeah, it's okay. And then, just behind me there, outside the McLaren garage again, Daniel Ricciardo was filming a piece to camera for his fans, so you guys will see it very shortly, I'm sure, saying thanks so much for the support, for making him feel welcome at McLaren, and we're going to wind it up, is what he said. So, we've seen great performances from both him and Lando over the last few days, but as we always know, there is more in the tank, and these coming days and weeks before we go racing here in Bahrain, McLaren have got more to offer, and I can't wait to see what they've got in the locker. Unfortunately, I couldn't get a word with Daniel Ricciardo because he's a busy man, he's got some appearances, but Lando Norris caught up with us a little earlier on, so let's hear what Lando has to say about his 3 days here in Bahrain.
Okay. Well, Lando, it's a little while ago you were last in the car today. How was it this morning?
How was it? I think it was alright. It was my first morning session, you know, so a few differences in temperature being one of the biggest ones. I was kind of not the lucky one, but I was in the evenings on the first 2 days, so probably had the slightly nicer conditions apart from when it was the sandstorm. But it was a good morning, you know, a lot of testing gone through, a mixture of the shorter runs and the longer runs as usual, but nothing out of the ordinary. It's just a test where we're trying things on the car, trying different balances, trying to understand it. So when we get here in a couple of weeks, we're ready and prepared, you know. So it was a good morning, but the whole test has been pretty smooth, no major setbacks, and just nice to be back in a Formula One car again.
Yeah, of course. Now, obviously a new teammate this year, a new engine in the car. You're the constant, so how valuable is your feedback to the engineers in comparing to last year and making improvements for this year?
I mean, it's valuable. I don't know I think, you know, all information is valuable in the end of the day. So we both have different sides of the feedback, you know, from Daniel and myself. But both it's important. Both, you know, his understanding of what Renault did last year and what he can bring to the table from that side, and of course the differences from last year's McLaren to this year's McLaren, what bits are better, what bits are worse, because, you know, we've taken downforce off, so things can still be worse. It's not like everything's going to be much better. So it's been trying to understand that, see the differences in it all, and I think we've done that quite nicely over the past few days. But like I said, all information is valuable, so no, it's not a competition.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have said, okay, lots of laps for some teams, not as many laps for McLaren, but no problems. And given the changes we've had this year, I suppose it's all good signs. So how's the feeling, you know, with you, with the engineers and the team?
It's good. I think all, you know, my side of the garage and everyone I know is well, I know everyone that I'm working with. There's no new faces with me apart from Daniel, really. So I think I've been able to settle in very quickly and just feel comfortable and at home straight away, which is nice, especially with only 3 days of testing. 3 days is not a lot, especially when you're splitting them. It's 1.5 days really, so it's not easy to kind of get everything, you know, feel at home in a Formula One car, because a Formula One car is not an easy thing to get used to. So I think it's been good. Like you said, we haven't done the most laps, but I think we haven't had problems. We haven't just been sitting in the garage or anything. I think we've just been thoroughly going through everything, testing everything we wanted to do, and sticking to our run plan, doing long runs, doing short runs. But yeah, I think we've still had a good few days. It's not always about who can do the most laps, but no, I think we put ourselves in a good position for when we come back for the race.
Definitely. Cheers, Lando.
Thank you.
Great to hear from Lando Norris, and I'm delighted to have been joined once again this week by Sam Collins. They finally let you out of Tech Towers in Big Inn Hill. Great to have you back at the track, mate. We have been poring over all of these cars all week, and the McLaren is one, I think, of the most interesting cars for a number of reasons. Firstly, of course, the only team that changed engine supplier over the winter. That meant that the tokens that they could use, they then couldn't, because they had to spend them on integrating that Mercedes power unit into the back of their car. And yet they've still been able to come to the track with innovation that their rivals haven't.
Yeah, I mean, that's the really impressive thing about the McLaren. This car, they never planned to race it this year. This was meant to be the new rules car with a new Mercedes engine, the new air from McLaren. Then they've come up with a bunch of those innovations when actually that work would have only started around the Austrian Grand Prix last year. That's not a lot of time to do all of this aerodynamic work. It's so impressive. You can see it there on your screen, all of those little details around, not just around the rear floor, but really big hit on the curb there, if you saw the suspension moving. Now, what you can't see on that shot, but maybe we'll see in a minute, is this diffuser that everybody's talking about. That is one of those things that's going to really change the way things are done in 2021. There you see it now. They found a loophole in the regulations along the side of the base of the gearbox. There's those little fins. That's a way to get around the 2021 technical regulations, and everybody in this pit lane is staring up the back of that McLaren right now.
Fascinating, isn't it? It's always these little surprises when we get to testing that other teams are pouring over. As we said on commentary and on F1 TV Tech Talk earlier this week, of course, as soon as the cars leave the garages on that first day, spy photographers around the track are shooting from every conceivable angle, getting those photos sent back to base, and they are pouring over every tiny detail of the cars. It doesn't matter how many images they manage to keep from us during their launches and during their shakedowns. Within that first hour, Everyone knows everything.
Absolutely. I've got those exact same photos, actually, because I share them with somebody. And those photos are really telling. And actually, just to give you an idea of how many photos the spy photographers generate per day, I have on the Alpine alone, it's the only one I've looked at from today, I have 8 gigabytes from this morning alone of high-res photos of the Alpine. So
Wow.
multiply that up and down the grid by 3 days. That's the level of photography we're getting.
It's absolutely incredible. That McLaren, whilst being technically fascinating, has also proved to be bulletproof. They have gone through their run program meticulously, every box ticked. How good do we think McLaren are actually looking for the start of this season?
Well, you heard Joe say it earlier on. It's really hard to judge from the times where everybody stacks up on the grid. But to run so consistently, so reliably, all the way through those 3 days of testing, that's both a blessing and a curse for McLaren. Because they haven't broken the car yet, they don't know what's going to break. It's a bit of a nightmare for an engineer.
Well, that's it. I said to Andreas a little bit earlier today, I said, look, the engineer in you, did you actually want something to break on the car? Did you want something to go wrong this week just so you know you put it through its paces? And he said, believe me, there are quite a few things that we weren't overly happy with. But in terms of getting through the program and overall ultimate reliability, yeah, we couldn't be happier. So it's not been perfect, but it has been good. I'd say better than good.
I mean, right now, down in that garage at McLaren, they're not just sort of polishing off the car and getting ready for the race in a few days. It's actually, they're pulling that car limb from limb. Every nut, bolt, washer, it's all coming apart. It's going back down to a bare monocoque, power unit out. They're going to study everything, crack testing, all sorts of other analysis going on that car. That'll feed back to McLaren and Woking. And then they'll put that work and those lessons into play, and they'll have some new fixes in place for the Grand Prix, even though there's not many fixes to make from what I see.
Now, talking about that McLaren garage, of course, it wasn't so long ago that the driver, who we've just heard from, Lando Norris, was working in that garage as their young junior reserve driver, making the tea for a certain 2-time Formula One world champion, 3-time world champion, of course. He is a world endurance champion as well. And today, well, this week, in fact, marked the return of Fernando Alonso to Formula One. Wonderful to see him back. Great for the sport as a champion returns.
Fernando Alonso becomes the youngest man to win a Formula One Grand Prix.
We did it. We did it.
180 miles an hour around the outside.
Incredible. He's got away with it. He takes the lead.
That's a massive impact.
I've never seen anything like it.
There we go. A champion returns, and he was on it. Straight from his first laps in the car yesterday. Of course, he had that terrible road accident just a few weeks ago, seemingly mended, and in a car that seemed compliant for him, and he was just gunning through his paces.
A good friend of mine, an engineer, calls him the Mega Spaniard. This is a guy who's, as you say, he fell off his bike. He's got 2 titanium plates in his face, I hear. And he's setting lap times and doing so well in that new Alpine. It's not bad for an old fella.
It's not bad for an old fella. And it's not bad for an old chassis. That is now a 3-year-old chassis on that Renault/Alpine car.
Yeah, because of the technical regulations that you had to homologate your monocoque, Renault, as it was then, got a bit caught out because they had to keep the same monocoque that they'd carried over from 2019 into 2020 and now into 2021 as the new Alpine. That is a little bit, what I would have said is, well, that's suboptimal. You don't want that. You're leaving some performance on the table. You didn't expect to have to do that. But my word, they have done a huge amount of work on this car.
They really have, and they've concentrated a lot of that focus onto the floor. We have a little look at it here. Of course, the floor, an area that everybody is focused on, trying to recoup the downforce they've lost through the new regs, but there is Alpine's version.
Yeah, you can see in the red section, that's where the rules have made you lose that bit of the floor from 2020 and gone for this narrow floor in blue. But that's just the first iteration of floor that Alpine have tried at this test. I've seen 3 separate iterations of floor on the car. We don't have footage, I think, of the second one. But the other big thing you need to be looking at on this car, and when I say it's a big thing, you really can't miss it. Look at the roll hoop of the Haas here. That's a normal Formula One car style roll hoop. And then look at that stonking huge, and I called it Porky earlier, the airbox on this Alpine is absolutely enormous, but the reason for it is quite logical. They've moved some of the coolers from the side pod up into the centre of the car. It slims down the side pods of the car, gets more air over the rear floor, gets more air to help them seal that diffuser. It's all about aerodynamics, but it does raise that centre of gravity quite high.
And fascinatingly, you'd think that having something that bulbous would create drag for the car as well.
It will probably increase the frontal area at the top of the car, if you like, but because you've slimmed down those side pods, it doesn't, because you've saved that space low down. And that's more important, because you can get that airflow to where you want it. That airflow up behind the driver's head, it's not much use for anything anyway.
Fascinating. I just like the fact it looks like the Ligier JS5 from the 1970s with that massive air intake over the top.
Was that the one that was in Transformers?
I can't. Which one? There've been so many Transformers. I don't know. The cartoon or the movies?
Oh, the cartoon.
Obviously. I'm honestly not sure. Now, while we had the interest of a returning champion at Alpine, and of course McLaren attempting to get back to potentially race-winning ways in 2021, the team that have made all the headlines this week with their consistency and their pace is Red Bull Racing, and Rosanna, I believe, is down in the paddock, down at Red Bull.
I am, Will. I am just outside the Red Bull garage, and what are we all up to right now? Well, I am definitely not up to it, but everyone's cleaning wheels. You can see the wheels there with the Mercedes guys up there. They're having their wheels cleaned. I've just seen the Aston Martin guys preparing some tables to clean the wheels. But it looks relatively quiet outside Red Bull, so maybe they've already cleaned their wheels. Because it has been, as Will says, a consistent few days for both Max Verstappen and Checo Perez. I've seen Max Verstappen a couple of times. In case you wondered what the drivers get up to in between sessions, in between being in the car and in the hospitality areas, they've been doing photo shoots. They've been getting ready for the season in terms of all the promotional material. So they've been in green screen. They've been doing all the poses that you'll see at the beginning of a race when we go through the grid. So that just gives you a little flavour of what else they've been up to. And as I mentioned, Daniel Ricciardo was just off doing an appearance. So they've still been busy off the track as well as on. And I have to say, I'm still wrapping my head around all the new liveries, the new uniforms, team kit, and seeing Sergio Perez in Red Bull kit. It feels right, it looks right, but you still do a little bit of a double take, and you're like, oh yeah, Checo's at Red Bull now, of course, it makes sense. And how exciting that's going to be to see him here in a fortnight's time, driving the Red Bull in anger. It seems like Red Bull have come out of the blocks charging, excuse the pun, but of course, over the last couple of years, we've kind of got used to them launching a not quite ready car and building on that and developing that through this season. Well, I tell you what, Christian Horner and Adrian Newey were obviously happy with what they'd seen, because I saw them leaving the paddock around lunchtime. Had a quick chat with Mattia Binotto as they left, went through the turnstiles, and off they went. But I'm sure they'll be following closely on their phones, and they'll be cheered to see the fact that Max Verstappen had topped the timesheets and a 1-2 in terms of Honda power units. Of course, Yuki Tsunoda in second place as well. So no sign of the drivers at the moment. As I said, Max Verstappen topping the timesheets, and Checo Perez getting comfy now in that RB16B. Let's hear from Checo now.
So that's it, Checo. Testing done and dusted before the season starts, and if we're to read anything into the timesheets, it was pretty good for you.
It's crazy to think that the preseason is over. It just feels like it's about to start, you know. I think it's the shortest preseason ever in my career. So yes, very limited amount of running in testing. We are improving every time we are in the car. We seem to be getting more comfortable. We were able to get through different setup items, and yeah, I think now we just have to look forward to the race weekend, because conditions are going to be very different when we come back here. We're tricky today with the wind. But yeah, all in all, I'm pleased with my pre-season testing.
With what you've managed to get done, I know it's limited testing. Do you feel ready to go at Red Bull?
Yeah, I think saying ready, I got no other option, you know. But yeah, we just have to make the most of it and start step by step. Be patient in the beginning, and things will come to us.
People often say that the Red Bull was a difficult car to drive last year. You're an experienced driver. How was it for you?
Well, I haven't driven many Red Bull cars before, but I have to say that the first one I've driven feels good, feels pretty good, and certainly there is a good potential in the car.
So you're excited about the season? You reckon you've got a car that you can challenge with?
Yeah, definitely. I'm pretty excited. I think we got a good car underneath us, and the team is doing a fantastic job. And yeah, as I've always said, you know, it doesn't matter where we start in Bahrain, it's where we finish in Abu Dhabi. So let's go ahead, step by step, and it should be a good season for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sergio Perez with the move of a lifetime to a team which, as we've seen this week, has the potential to fight not just for podiums, potentially for wins, potentially, we think, for the World Championship.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how he stacks up against Max Verstappen in that RB16B. That's a car that was designed around Max and not Perez, but he seems to be getting on quite nicely with it.
Very nicely indeed. What have you seen on that Red Bull that's interested you from a tech perspective?
Well, actually, I'm a bit surprised that there wasn't as much to see on that car from the word go. They covered everything up. They didn't want to show us any pictures of it after their shakedown run, and I thought, well, what's going on here? There must be something really special. Actually, the floor seems pretty straightforward, but this was the moment for me.
Well, we saw a bit more of the car than they wanted us to.
Well, yeah, certainly. The Red Bull definitely didn't want to see what you're about to see on your screen as that car turns right. Have a look. Max Verstappen's engine cover blew off, and I think that's probably finger trouble more than anything else, caused the red flag, and that exposed the gubbins under the engine cover for all of us to see. Actually, it wasn't the most revealing sight, but it did just show us there is definitely a Honda power unit in the back of that.
There definitely is. What is it about that car, then, that you think has provided them with such a solid foundation, such a solid start to the year? Is it simply that they've got over the woes that they had last year, a very sketchy rear, a car that was fast but unstable?
I think that's exactly it. 1 year ago, or just over 1 year ago, you and I were standing in the paddock in Barcelona thinking, oh, that thing looks horrible to drive. And I think it had an aerodynamic instability at the rear, which they never cured. The new rules seems to have got around that for them, and they've got a car that is stable all round. So it means all of the benefits that Red Bull had last year are now working.
Now, here's the thing. Red Bull have run a high-rake concept for years. Mercedes have not. What we were discussing earlier this week is that with these new regulations and the reduction of the downforce at the rear of the car, that cut out of the floor at the rear of the car, actually having a higher rake plays to your advantages in terms of recouping some of that. Mercedes have suddenly inherited a sketchy rear, an unstable car, and we hypothesized perhaps Mercedes now starting to play with that high rate concept that Red Bull have perfected.
Absolutely, and Mercedes haven't really revealed what they're doing with the rear of the car, but I can tell you they absolutely have changed the rear suspension geometry. Have they changed the gearbox? If they have, then they've gone to high rake, and that's the result. A car that just doesn't want to go round corners, or in this case, far too keen to go round corners.
It is so reminiscent of Red Bull last year. A fast car, but a car in which the drivers have zero confidence because it brakes on them. Brakes away, I should say, on them.
Yeah, the drivers just, if they don't have that feeling on the rear axle, it means you're either pushing and it snaps away. This is what happened to Red Bull last year. Or it's just, you just can't get the confidence in it and the drivers struggle. And some drivers are really sensitive to that rear axle. And I think Bottas may struggle more than Hamilton, but Hamilton will push hard and have moments. If it's a bit soggy at the Hungaroring, he needs to be really careful on that lap to the grid.
Now, we've just heard from Sergio Perez, and Sergio Perez, of course, was a very last-minute addition to the Red Bull team. That was because he'd been replaced at Racing Point, now Aston Martin, by a certain former Red Bull driver in Sebastian Vettel. That Aston Martin, Sam, is a really interesting car. It is, as we've said, not a green Mercedes. It's very much an Aston Martin.
That's right. Actually, the Aston Martin is the only truly new 2021 Formula One car. Everybody else on the grid is using an old chassis. Aston Martin used its tokens to introduce a new monocoque. Really clever, because they were upgrading 2019 Mercedes components to 2020 parts, and that allowed them a little bit of extra token spend, and they've done really, really nicely with that.
And as if by magic, Rosanna Tennant is down at Aston Martin.
Well, I am, Will, but I've turned around because I wanted to show you what's going on at Red Bull. Jonathan Wheatley, the sporting director for Red Bull Racing, has got all the team together and they're having a bit of a debrief. And I thought you might all like to see that. I wonder what he's saying to them all. So that's why it was quiet at Red Bull. I worked it out. It isn't because they've cleaned their tyres already. It's because they're having a proper debrief, of course, because they're a proper team. So here we go. Behind me, Aston Martin, as you said, as if by magic. Outside, Aston Martin, all rebranded and going back to those new colours, liveries, team kits. They're looking slick. I'm liking the green. I'm not sure what you guys think at home, whether you're a fan of the new racing green or not, but I think it looks great. The car certainly looks great, but bottom of the timesheets today, Sebastian Vettel and Lance Stroll making up the numbers at the very end there, 19th and 20th. And only 56, that's not even a number, 56 laps for Sebastian Vettel. He had some time out of the car, a few issues earlier on in the testing period. Has that proved troublesome for him? He needs all the time he can get, so I'm sure he's looking forward to getting back in the car in a fortnight's time for FP1 ahead of the Bahrain Grand Prix. Let's hear from Sebastian Vettel now and see how he's found the 3 days here in Bahrain.
I know that it's difficult to talk about performance and the pecking order and all that kind of thing, but you've used so many different cars now. Do you feel like you've got a good car underneath you, and once you get on top of everything?
Well, it's all relative, you know. Obviously, yeah, it's a lot of new things, and I think in fairness, you know, it's hard to say at this stage how much were the conditions. The first 2 days were quite brutal. Today was better for me. I had the afternoon session. Lots of things calmed down. It will be difficult to filter all the impressions because the tyres are different, the cars have changed, and I'm sure that lots of the experiences I've made, other people have made as well, so that's where it's all relative. And for performance, as far from what I've seen, it looks to be very close. Yeah, that would be good if it's like that. So yeah, I think Red Bull looks very strong. Mercedes, everything then being at the top would be a surprise to everyone. But it looks like all the midfield has caught up. But then again, it depends, and then how the car feels. The car feels fine, but like I said, it's relative. The car can feel fantastic, but if it's too slow, then it's painful. And if it feels horrible, but it's faster than everyone else, you accept it. So yeah, but we'll find out more when we go racing.
Just finally, with testing being so limited this year and you changing teams, now heading into that first race, is that these first couple of races going to still be like a test session in a way as you kind of settle in?
Well, I know there will be races, and I'm looking forward to go racing. Testing is normally not that exciting, but obviously if everything is new, then we would have, you know, liked to have more days, also with the little hiccups that we had, but yeah, it is what it is. So as I said, it won't be like testing, it will still be racing, but we will have to learn a lot. And everybody will. I think it's not just us, and it's not just the lack of laps here, but everybody in the first couple of races will learn about their cars, their tyres more and more. So naturally you are at a different state when you approach the middle or the end of the season than the beginning.
Great stuff. See you in a couple of weeks.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Boost pressure issue for Sebastian Vettel, then curtailing his final day of running. Sam, last year the talk at Racing Point was all about brake ducts, and so of course when we got here to the test, our guys had to clip up the brake ducts just to make another comparison, just so we could see what they've been doing over the winter.
It was literally the first thing we looked at, actually. It's because at the launch, Racing Point had these brake ducts on last year. They're the 2020 Mercedes brake ducts. You can see the comparison there. Then Aston Martin turned up with these brand new brake ducts for testing. But at the launch, they had the Mercedes 2020 ducts on. And then they reverted from this new brake duct package to the original 2020 Mercedes-style ducts. So they are at it again a little bit, but it is allowed because they raced them last year.
Does that mean we can stop talking about Team Silverstone's brake ducts?
No, because I never stop talking about brake ducts.
OK. Can we talk about the car, though, which isn't a green Mercedes? It is an Aston Martin. And it's not had the best of weeks, but when it has been running, it's looked good.
Well, you mentioned that turbo failure or turbo issue, boost pressure issue on the Aston Martin. That's a Mercedes power unit. Mercedes introduced a new turbocharger on that unit. There's another little wobble in there, you know, the little concern about them. But the car, other than that, does look like it's got a lot of potential, but I'm not entirely sure they've unlocked it yet.
Yeah, absolutely. A big job for them this year. We're having a little look here at the difference in the engine covers. Of course, this is what Racing Point started with, very much Mercedes, then moved to an almost Williams-ish design later in last year. Their design this year, very much all of their own. That lump on the side is something they have in common with the big sister team at Mercedes, and that is for the new Mercedes power unit in the back.
Yeah, there's got a plenum. That's the carbon fibre bit on the top. But here's the crucial change.
Yeah, that's the top change.
On the right, you can see Aston Martin have lowered the side impact structure on the monocoque. That is a fundamental change to the way you make the chassis. You can't just unglue it and stick it off down the bottom. That is a new homologation. You have to completely redo the composites. It's a huge change, and that's what makes it a true Aston Martin.
And that's where they spent their tokens.
Indeed, 2 tokens, that's it. And that, but I love it. New chassis, new car, new identity.
Now, of course, we were talking about rake earlier and Racing Point, Aston Martin. It's going to be one of those years, isn't it? Alpine, Renault, Racing Point. There is a difference in rake. The Aston Martin running a low rake, that Alpha Tauri, a really good exemplification of the high rake that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, it's just the rear end of the car. So if you see got that blue triangle underneath the car, that's a high rake. The rear ride height is higher. The green triangle underneath the Aston Martin, that's a low rake. And the new rules where they've lost that bit of the floor, that really punishes those low rake cars. But to go from a low rake to a high rake philosophy, it's a very difficult thing to do, particularly for what I call a one-year car, a car where none of the lessons you learn aerodynamically can be applied into 2022.
And as if to magically segue from one team to another, Alpha Tauri we've been talking about them all week, one of the most surprising and impressive teams of the test. Bulletproof reliability, wicked fast on track, just like the big sister team over at Red Bull, that new Honda engine in the back. Gasly putting in the laps, cannot hide his confidence in the car. Yuki Tsunoda, the rookie, super fast this afternoon as well. There's a lot of good feeling down at AlphaTauri.
The real key change to that car is they adopted last year's Red Bull front suspension and steering system. They're allowed to do that without spending any tokens. They spent their new tokens on a new nose on the car. However, to apply that 2019 Red Bull front end, they had to change the front of the monocoque. That's more tokens. Went to speak to the team. They told me, oh no, we actually got last year's tubs, modified them, which means they cut chunks out and glued bits back in. And because they did that, it's legal under the current rules. It's a real fine line, what they've done.
It's a fine line, but it's, well, to quote Paul McCartney, there is a fine line between recklessness and courage. And it shows, I think, a decent amount of courage, a decent amount of initiative as well. And the pace that they're showing, it could well pay off for them. Let's hear now, though, from their rookie, a guy who in 2017 was making his single-seater debut. He has run just 100 races in his career. He is very exciting. He is Yuki Tsunoda.
Well, that was quite a nice way to wrap up testing. 93 milliseconds away from Verstappen. Of course, we don't know what load of fuel is everyone having, but how good did it feel to actually be out and go for it?
Yeah, especially this today was really good day. Good progress, no issues, and I just focus on my driving. So that's what I want to. So that was really good. Yeah, these 2 days we had a little bit bad luck days, but this today we put it all together, and I think mechanics and Honda did a really good job, and there was no issue. It was really comfortable to drive whole day, whole session, and achieved 91 laps. So that was really good testing.
What things are you especially enjoying from the car, and which ones do you think will give you the extra step forward?
Well, definitely I enjoy C5, the most soft one tire. Big grip. Like I never had experience like that grip. Even when I was testing if Imola or Imosano, much less grip because it was I think so. Yeah, so definitely I enjoyed it, and also from there we had a good data from there. So today was really enjoyable day. Also for the learning, for my driving, and also for the tire. Especially I did a race simulation, whole race simulation, and also for the tire management side. I had a good step forward and good data for the Bahrain, and so it was good.
Now, Sam, you've spent a lot of time in Japan and Japanese racing. Yuki is not your usual Japanese racer.
He's really not. I mean, that little Hinamaru on his cap is a really neat touch, just to highlight his identity. But Japanese motorsport, particularly at the low levels like Japanese F4, it is tough. I mean, these guys race hard. It's not just the young guys in there as well. Sometimes they chuck in the old guys who are super experienced, know every track inside out. And for a driver like that to come up so quickly, and they know a good race driver, for him to come up so quickly and be jumped into F2 and then into F1 with the Honda team, that's exceptional. I think he's got real special talent, and I think he's going to go a very, very long way in this sport.
Awesome stuff. Sam, before I let you go, I just want to know who you've been impressed with this week, who you think is going to be the target team when we come back here in 2 weeks' time.
The target team is always going to be on the car with the three-pointed star on the nose, but will they have already dropped that target and will it moved to the car with the Red Bull on the side? I think it might have done, but it won't stay like that for long. Mercedes will be back.
Thank you so much, mate. Appreciate, as always, your insight and your intellect. It's been great sharing the week with you. Tech Talk, of course, is coming through the season for you on F1 TV. But for now, Sam, thanks very much, mate. We'll see you in a little bit. Let's have a look now at the race calendar for 2021 as it stands, and it all starts here in 2 weeks' time at the Bahrain International Circuit. Imola follows on the 18th of April before we go to Portimao in May, followed immediately by Spain, then back to Monaco and the streets of Baku. Canada follows in June before we go to France and Austria, Silverstone in July, Hungary in August, then Spa, Zandvoort, Monza and Sochi, Singapore and Suzuka, Austin, Mexico, Sao Paulo, then Australia, rescheduled to the 21st of November, Saudi Arabia on the 5th of December, and Abu Dhabi. Goodness me, just 13 days before Christmas. Well, guys, that is about it from testing, and that is about it from us. It's been a fascinating 3 days, and as we said at the top, just about as many questions asked as we've had answers. Are Mercedes in trouble? Are Red Bull the team to beat? Has McLaren managed to form an immediate alliance that will bring them success with Mercedes? Where do Aston Martin sit? How competitive are Alpine? And are AlphaTauri about to spring a surprise? And all of that then, a team we haven't really even spoken about today because they've just bubbled a little bit under the radar. What is going on down at Ferrari, and can they retake that mantle as one of the target teams in Formula One? Cannot wait to find out. We will have already seen the first race of the season in 2 weeks' time when we are back here in Bahrain. Be sure to join us for what promises to be an absolutely fascinating and exhilarating season. For now, though, from Sam Collins, from Rosanna Tennant, from Jolyon Palmer, from all our crew, both here and back at base, I've been Will Buxton. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks' time.